The 12-year-old girl was kicked out of her house for being pregnant, and years later she returned to shock everyone. Hello. Everyone enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch. Do you have anything to say for yourself? Shinelo Ikechuku's voice thundered through the already suffocating house as Shinelo cowered, unable to meet her father's eyes, while the 12-year-old girl stared at the ground, her hands trembling as they clutched the hem of her shirt. Shameless, Ngozi, Shinelo's wife, Ngozi added venomously, her gaze devoid of empathy. So young and already pregnant. My God, how could I have given birth to someone like this? I didn't mean to, Ngozi stammered, unable to hold back her tears. Didn't mean to. Ikechuku slammed his hand down on the table, making the entire room shake. Do you know how much disgrace you brought upon this family? Do you have any idea what people out there will say? How can you even show your face in this town anymore? Shinelo sneered. Ikechuku, why waste your breath on her? A girl like that doesn't deserve to stay here. Let her deal with the consequences herself. No, please, Mama, I'm begging you. Ngozi lifted her tear-streaked face to plead with her mother, only to be met with a gaze as cold as ice. What are you still kneeling there for? Get out. Ichuku stood abruptly, pointing to the door. It felt as if the ground had fallen out from beneath Ngozi's feet as she staggered back a few steps, her wide eyes filled with fear. I have nowhere to go. I don't know what to do, she whispered. That's your problem. Don't ever come back here. Ichuku turned his back on her as if she were a stranger. You're right. Keeping her here would only bring more shame to the family, Shinelo said, her voice steady but brimming with disdain. Outside, a few neighbors had gathered, peering curiously into the house as their prying eyes and murmurs buzzed like daggers in Ngozi's back. Leave already! Ikechuku shouted, his patience gone, as Ngozi turned and ran, tears streaming down her face. While the rain began to pour cold and heavy, and she wandered aimlessly down the dark streets, her small feet muddied and frozen. Get out of here, this isn't a place for you. A middle-aged man with a harsh expression blocked the doorway of an abandoned house where Ngozi had sought shelter. I just need a place to stay for one night, Ngozi pleaded, her voice choked with tears. Get lost. I don't want any trouble. He slammed the door, leaving Ngozi standing alone in the rain as she stumbled toward a nearby park, the cold benches her last refuge. And as the night deepened, Ngozi curled up on a bench, clutching her stomach as if to protect the tiny glimmer of hope growing within her. Hey, girl. Stop right there, a coarse voice called out, followed by malicious laughter as Ngozi turned to see three figures emerging from the shadows, with eyes filled with menace. What are you doing out here at this hour? We're looking for some fun, and you're perfect for it, one of them sneered, stepping closer with a wicked grin, and Ngozi couldn't speak, only backing away in fear. Don't run! Where do you think you're going? Ngozi bolted, with her tears blending with the rain as she ran blindly, her heart pounding violently in her chest, while the slippery ground threatened to trip her with every step, but the instinct to survive kept her moving, as the sound of footsteps closing in was deafening, until, by sheer luck, Ngozi darted into a narrow alley and lost them, collapsing with her body trembling with fear and exhaustion as she whispered, Why does everyone hate me? With her voice drowned by the rain that night as Ngozi curled up under a tree in the park where the rain showed no mercy, the cold seeping into her bones while she didn't know when she had fallen asleep, and in her dreams her parents appeared. But instead of love, they were filled with scorn and indifference. Ngozi, you deserve this. Shinelo's voice roared like thunder, jolting her awake as Ngozi opened her eyes, her body aching with the cold, a high fever clouding her mind, and her lips pale from the chill. Am I going to die here? The thought flitted through her mind, filling her with dread, while outside the rain continued to pour, yet Ngozi no longer had the strength to resist. As everything blurred before her eyes, when a warm, elderly voice broke through the haze. Child? What are you doing here? As Ngozi vaguely made out the silhouette of a woman leaning over her with a large umbrella shielding them both from the rain. Ngozi couldn't muster the strength to respond, and collapsed into the stranger's arms as the woman said, "Don't be afraid, poor child, I'll help you," gently lifting Ngozi with aged hands. And when Ngozi murmured, "Who are you?" her eyes closing from exhaustion, the woman replied, "I'm just an old baker, but you can't stay out here through the downpour." Carrying Ngozi to her small bakery on the corner of the street where the store is barbecue, Charlotte followed the stranger a little distance away, holding the child slightly lower. The house was modest but warm and filled with the comforting scent of pastries, a stark contrast to the cold outside. As her benefactor said, "Sit here, I'll get you some hot tea," placing Ngozi on a chair with a gaze full of compassion, as she looked at the drenched and shivering girl, so that for the first time in days, Ngozi felt a glimmer of warmth from a stranger's kindness. Yet deep down the pain and hurt remained, like an unhealed wound, and the next morning Ngozi awoke on an old wooden chair in Ngozi's bakery, with her head still throbbing from the fever she had battled the night before, as the aroma of freshly baked bread teased her senses, and her empty stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in 2 days, while her benefactor said gently, "You're awake? Here, have some warm milk," setting down a glass of milk and a small loaf of bread on the table, with eyes full of concern as she looked at the frail girl with a pale face. And Ngozi whispered weakly, "Thank you," though the weariness in her eyes remained, since she wasn't used to kindness, especially from a stranger, as her benefactor reassured her, "Don't worry, I don't need to know what happened, but it's clear you need help. Eat, then rest some more. We'll talk later." And as Ngozi picked up the bread with her hands trembling from hunger and fatigue, the harsh words of her parents echoed in her mind, causing her to put it down as tears silently streamed down her face, while her benefactor asked, "What's wrong?" And Ngozi sobbed, I don't deserve to eat. I'm the disgrace of my family," to which her benefactor gently took Ngozi's frail hands and said, "Listen to me, child. No one deserves to be treated like that. I don't know what you've been through, but I know you're a good girl and you deserve to live." And soon Ngozi began assisting in the small bakery, even though the work wasn't too demanding, while the judgmental stares of the neighborhood customers made her uneasy, until a woman whispered to her benefactor, "Who's that girl? She doesn't seem right. Don't let her ruin your reputation." To which her benefactor dismissed sharply, "What I do is none of your business. If you don't like it, find another bakery." Yet not everyone was as kind-hearted as her benefactor, because one afternoon, as Ngozi was wiping the tables, a man in a thick coat walked in. It was Chibuzo, the owner of the nearby grocery store notorious for being miserly and nosy, who said, "Ngozi, I need a word with you," casting a disapproving glance at her as he continued, "What is it, Chibuzo?" And pointing at Ngozi, he asked, "Do you know who she is? I heard she was kicked out of her house for doing something shameful. Keeping her here is asking for trouble." And though Ngozi kept her head down, trying not to cry, the cruel words stabbed her heart like daggers, while her benefactor straightened her back with a steely gaze and said, "Chibuzo, if you have nothing better to do, then leave. This girl hasn't harmed anyone, but you should think about your reputation. Who would want to buy bread from a bakery harboring someone like her?" And as Chibuzo's voice dripped with disdain, he added, "Get out of here, Chibuzo, and don't come back." And despite the mounting rumors throughout the neighborhood that the pregnant girl was living at Ngozi's bakery, the whispers and scornful looks grew increasingly unbearable. Until one evening, as Ngozi stepped outside to take out the trash, she was cornered by a group of young men from the neighborhood, when a rough-looking man named Kachubudi shouted, "Hey girl, who do you think you are living here?" And Ngozi stammered, I just want to live peacefully." But Chakudi snarled, "Peace? Someone like you wants peace? You've already disgraced this place," before shoving Ngozi hard, causing her to fall to the ground, until her benefactor's voice rang out from the bakery's entrance as she rushed over to help Ngozi to her feet, saying, If you don't know how to behave, then don't come here again. And as Chukwudi smirked, fine, but don't blame us when your bakery gets boycotted. Her benefactor ushered Ngozi back inside with elderly hands trembling with anger, as she admonished, "Don't listen to them, child. You've done nothing wrong." Yet Ngozi remained silent with tears streaming down her face, unsure how much more she could endure until the mounting pressure forced her benefactor to close the bakery for a few days to avoid further trouble, during which Ngozi tried to find work to help her benefactor. Though no one would hire her, as a restaurant owner declared with contempt, "We don't need anyone else," glancing disdainfully at her belly while Ngozi pleaded, "Please, give me a chance. I'll work hard," only to be met with a dismissive shake of the head as she went from place to place, feeling invisible and rejected by the entire world, until one afternoon, when she returned to the bakery and found her benefactor sitting forlornly at a table with a pile of bills stacked in front of her. As Ngozi asked worriedly, "Are you okay?" and her benefactor sighed, "I don't know if I can keep this bakery open much longer. People are threatening to stop buying from me," prompting Ngozi to say in a cracking voice, "If you stay here, I'll leave. I don't want to bring you any more trouble." And her benefactor, with eyes filled with pain, replied, "You foolish girl. You have nowhere else to go. I won't let you end up on the streets again." Though, in Ngozi's heart, the thought of leaving her benefactor grew stronger, as she didn't want the kind woman to suffer because of her. Until that night, when after tossing and turning, Ngozi woke with tired eyes, watching her benefactor still working tirelessly despite her age, filling Ngozi with gratitude and overwhelming guilt for adding to her benefactor's burdens, as she whispered, "I'm going to find a job. I don't want you to feel this pressure anymore." And her benefactor replied firmly, "I've told you, Ngozi, you don't need to worry. This is your home and you're not going anywhere." Yet determined, Ngozi left the bakery to search shop to shop in the neighborhood for work, as her heart sank with each judgmental stare and dismissive shake of the head, until a middle-aged woman named Chioma, owner of a sewing shop, scoffed, "Are you looking for a job? How laughable. We don't hire people like you. Do yourself a favor and leave before you dirty my store." And Ngozi bit her lip, holding back tears, and bowed her head in thanks as she quietly walked away, each step feeling heavier. Until that afternoon, when returning from selling flyers for meager money, she heard shouting from the nearby market as an elderly woman, red-faced with anger, pointed directly at her, declaring, "You stole my wallet!" While a crowd gathered with curious and judgmental eyes fixed on her, as Ngozi cried, "No, I didn't do it, I didn't take anything." But as two men blocked her way, one suggested menacingly, "Search her bag." And despite Ngozi clutching it tightly, a man ripped it from her hands and rummaged through it to find nothing, while the accusing woman, flustered, claimed she must have hidden it somewhere else, but someone like her surely isn't innocent, leaving Ngozi frozen with her whole body trembling, as anger and fear battled within her while the crowd murmured in agreement with the woman's baseless accusations, until one woman shouted, "Get out of here before I call the police!" pointing at Ngozi, who turned and ran, with tears streaming down her cheeks, unable to understand why people were so cruel, just because she was different and carried a tiny life inside her. Until, when Ngozi returned to the bakery, her benefactor waited with a worried expression and asked, "What happened, child? Why are you crying like this?" As Ngozi finally collapsed into her benefactor's arms, sobbing uncontrollably, "I didn't do anything wrong, but they still hate me. They treat me like trash. I can't take it anymore." And her benefactor gently stroked her hair, saying, "You foolish child. You must stay strong. Don't let them break you." Though Ngozi only shook her head as despair embedded in her soul grew until the next day, when her benefactor had to leave the bakery to meet the landlord about overdue rent, while Ngozi stayed behind trying to work but was haunted by threats from Chukwudi and neighborhood boys. until as she cleaned a table, the bakery door suddenly swung open, and Chukwudi with two friends entered with mischievous faces and said, "Hey there, little girl, how's the bakery doing today, Chukwudi?" Azgazi tried to stay calm and asked, "What do you want?" To which they replied, "We're just checking in on you. I heard old lady Ngozi is out, so it's just you here, right?" And with eyes gleaming with malice, Chukwudi smirked while Ngozi trembled. "Please leave. This isn't a place for trouble." But Chukwudi laughed. "Trouble? We're just here to help." "But with that attitude, maybe you don't want any help," stepping closer with sinister intent and jeering. "Do you think the baby in your belly will have a good life?" Ngozi instinctively wrapped her arms around her stomach and pleaded, "Go away, I'll call the police." But Chukwudi mocked, "Oh, go ahead. But do you think the police will believe you? A girl like you with no home and no family?" Leaving Ngazi frozen in fear and anger until a familiar voice from the doorway ordered, "Get out of here immediately!" As her benefactor appeared holding a broom with sharp eyes fixed on Chukwudi and his friends, and despite his smirk saying, "Fine, but remember this old lady? Your bakery won't stay safe for long," his threats lingering in the air and deepening Ngazi's despair. Until after chasing the boys away, her benefactor sat beside her with sympathy, as Ngazi whispered, "I don't know how I can keep going." And her benefactor replied firmly, "You must keep going, Ngazi. You're not just living for yourself, you're living for the child inside you. Don't let them win." Though deep down, Ngazi felt everything slipping out of control, and wondered how much more she could endure, until she woke after a night full of nightmares. Despite the once warm and cozy bakery, now slowly eroding under hostile stares and cruel gossip. As her benefactor advised, Ngozi, "Take the day off today. Don't go outside," while preparing dough. Noticing Ngozi's withdrawn eyes filled with worry and fear, and Ngozi murmured, "I can't just sit still, I need to do something to help you." Yet terrified of facing a world of scornful gazes, and her benefactor gently said, "You silly girl, don't worry about me. You need to take care of yourself first." And determined Ngozi later, while running errands, encountered Chinalo, a middle-aged vegetable seller at the corner market known for stirring up trouble and gossip, who mockingly said, "Huh? Ngozi? You're still here, huh?" Ngozi softly replied she just wanted to buy some vegetables, only for Chinalo to continue contemptuously, "You still have the nerve to show your face around here. I thought you'd have disappeared by now. Numire anigano nanako wagamal." And then turned to the shopkeeper and demand, "You still have the nerve to show your face around here? I thought you'd have disappeared by now," drawing curious eyes as Ngozi pleaded she didn't want to cause trouble, only to be accused loudly, "You think you're not causing trouble with that belly? You've disgraced this entire neighborhood." And when Ngozi tried to say she just wanted peace, Chinalo snapped, "Peace? Someone like you wants peace? You're just a child who couldn't control yourself, and now you expect everyone else to deal with the shame you bring," drawing laughter and ridicule from the crowd until Ngozi couldn't take it anymore and ran away, with each step heavier as if carrying the weight of the world's disdain. And later that evening, while cleaning the bakery, 3 unfamiliar men entered with menacing faces, with Chukwudi among them asking, "Where's your benefactor?" And Ngozi answered, "She's not here," prompting Chukwudi to smirk. "Good, then we'll just talk to you," moving closer threateningly, saying, "You think you can live here peacefully? We already told you this place doesn't welcome you." To which Ngozi pleaded, "Please, I just want to work. I don't want to cause any trouble." But Chukwudi shouted, "Trouble? You are trouble! Ever since you showed up, this neighborhood has been full of rumors. We've lost customers because of this bakery sheltering you." Slamming his hand down so hard that Ngozi flinched and backed away, as his companions tossed everything off the counter, causing freshly baked bread to crumble and ingredients to spill everywhere, while Ngozi cried, "Stop! Please don't do this!" Yet Chukwudi only laughed. "This is your lesson. Get out of here before things get worse. And after they left, Ngozi collapsed amid the wreckage, picking up broken pieces of bread with trembling hands and tears flowing, until her benefactor returned, horrified at the state of the bakery, and asked, "What happened here?" I can't stay here anymore." As Ngozi choked out, "I'm only bringing you trouble." And her benefactor gripped her shoulders tightly, saying, "You're not going anywhere. We'll get through this together." Though Ngozi knew deep down her presence burdened her benefactor, until 2 days later, when a notice from the landlord warned that the bakery would be repossessed if overdue rent wasn't paid within a week. And though her benefactor tried to hide her worry, Ngozi said tearfully, "I'm going to leave. If I'm not here, maybe people will leave you alone," only to be firmly told, "You're not going anywhere, Ngozi. I've told you this is your home." Yet Ngozi knew her presence had ruined everything, as that night she stared at the ceiling with a heavy heart, thinking, "I have to leave for her sake, and for Chiamaka's," feeling the tiny life move inside her and whispering, "I'm sorry, Chiamaka, but I can't stay here forever." And the next morning, Ngozi packed her few belongings into an old bag while watching her benefactor still asleep in the corner, and fought back tears as she left a short note on the table reading, "Dear Ngozi, I am so grateful for everything you've done for me, but I can't stay here and cause you more trouble. I will find somewhere else to live, and I hope people will stop pressuring you. I love you very much." And taking one last look while placing her hand on her stomach, she whispered, "Chiamaka, we have to be strong because no one else will help us," and stepped outside, quietly leaving the bakery in silence as she wandered the streets until she found a cheap boarding house on the outskirts of town where no one cared who she was, though with little money she could only afford a few nights in room number 3. And when the landlord, a middle-aged woman named Adesola, curtly said, "Don't bother me if you can't pay up," tossing her the key into a small, dark, damp room, where Ngozi sat on the bed with tears threatening to fall, as she thought of her benefactor and the warmth of the bakery. But now it was just her and Chiamaka as she whispered, "We'll be okay," though she doubted it. And on her first day at the boarding house, Ngozi went out looking for work, only to be rejected with the familiar words, "No vacancies, you're too young, we don't want trouble," stabbing at her heart, knowing her growing belly made her an easy target for judgment and rejection. Until she returned to find children gathered near her door, laughing and pointing at her belly. One boy shouting it was like a big balloon, while another cruelly added she must be a bad person for being kicked out. And though Ngozi tried to explain, their laughter grew louder until, that night, she lay in the dark holding her belly, trying to soothe herself and Chiamaka to sleep, while echoes of mocking laughter haunted her. And the next morning, as she tried to leave early to avoid seeing anyone, Adesola waited outside accusingly. "You stole from me, didn't you?" To which Ngozi protested, "No, I didn't take anything." And when Adesola demanded 24 hours to pay or get out, claiming, "I won't keep a thief in my house," Ngozi lowered her head in tears as everyone whispered, until that night she found her room ransacked, with her meager belongings scattered, and her small pouch of money missing. And as she ran out to report the theft, Adesola yelled, "It's you again! Don't try to blame anyone else. You did this to yourself," leaving Ngozi speechless and overcome with helplessness as she returned to her room, clutching her belly and sobbing. "I'm sorry, Chiamaka. I couldn't protect you. Where will we go now?" While all she could hear was the howling wind through the cracks, reminding her of her isolation. And the next morning she left the boarding house, carrying her few belongings in a worn bag, as the sound of keys jangling while returning them to Adesola was met with indifference. And as Ngozi wandered through streets that now felt alien, with every path rejecting her, her stomach growled with hunger as the icy wind cut through her thin coat, leaving her shivering until she reached an old market corner, where kind strangers had once given her leftover food. But today, no one noticed her until she mustered the courage to ask softly, "Excuse me? Do you have any leftover food? Only to be met with disdain and told to go elsewhere. As she bowed her head in humiliation and walked away with her eyes fixed on the ground, until at a small park she sat on a bench cradling her belly while tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Chiamaka, I'm sorry. What did I do wrong for us to suffer like this?" And then a group of children passed by, laughing loudly, one boy mocking her sighs and another throwing a stone. Yet she endured in silence as night fell, and she wandered to a secluded corner among abandoned buildings, where even sleep eluded her with the haunting echo of laughter. Until, when all seemed hopeless, she heard footsteps approaching, and looked up tearfully to see her benefactor rushing to her with a flashlight and old umbrella, exclaiming, "Ngozi, you foolish child! You scared me half to death. I've been searching everywhere for you." And as her benefactor knelt, touching her trembling face and asking why she left, Ngozi sobbed, "I didn't want to make you suffer anymore." And her benefactor embraced her tightly, saying, "Don't you understand, Ngozi? You are my family. I would never leave you, no matter what happens." And in that cold darkness, Ngozi felt warmth in her benefactor's arms, as she whispered apologies and was consoled with promises that they would get through it together. And the next morning they returned to the small bakery, which now truly felt like home, as they tidied up and baked bread together while Ngozi's benefactor softly promised, "We'll make things better." And as time passed, Ngozi learned to ignore the judgmental stares and gossip, while focusing on caring for Chiamaka, and the bakery once again filled with the aroma of freshly baked bread, drawing old customers back. And Ngozi stood behind the counter, filled with hope, as she thanked her benefactor, who gently patted her hand, saying, "You're my family. Family sticks together no matter what." And under that small roof, they lived a simple yet peaceful life, until 13 years passed, since Ngozi had been cast out by her parents. And now, a strong, independent woman with her benefactor's help, she had opened a small cafe on the outskirts of Lagos, named Chiamaka, after her daughter, who, at 13, reflected Ngozi's younger self, with intelligence and confidence as she helped her mother serve customers with a bright smile, in a life filled with joy and love. Until one morning, as Ngozi cleaned the cafe counter, Amera, an old friend of her benefactor, carrying old photographs of her youth, entered, saying, "Ngozi, look at how beautiful you were in your youth." And as Ngozi smiled, looking at the pictures while acknowledging that it was her benefactor, who saved her during her darkest days, Chiamaka ran up curious, asking, "Mom, is this her? I've never seen photos of you when you were young." And Ngozi replied warmly, "Yes, my love. She did so much for me and for you." While suddenly the cafe doorbell chimed, and an elderly woman with silver hair and a frail figure stepped in with eyes of weariness that held a familiarity, and softly said, "Ngozi, it's me, your mother," causing the atmosphere to grow heavy, as Amara stepped back, and Chiamaka looked on in confusion until Ngozi composed herself and demanded coldly, "What are you doing here after 13 years? You think you can just walk into my life as if nothing happened?" And the elderly woman lowered her head, her voice hoarse. "I know I have no right, but I can't continue living with this guilt. I came to apologize." And Ngozi bitterly retorted, "Apologize? You threw me out on the streets without a shred of compassion, choosing the family's honor over the daughter you birthed, and now you think a simple apology can fix everything?" As Chiamaka tugged at her mother's hand in confusion. "Mom, what's going on? Who is she?" And Ngozi finally revealed, "Chiamaka, this is your grandmother." To which Chiamaka asked in surprise, "Is it true? Are you my grandmother?" And the elderly woman knelt with remorse in her eyes. "Yes, my dear. I am your mother's mother, and I made terrible mistakes. I abandoned her when she needed me most, but I cannot go on living without trying to make things right." And as Chiamaka looked to Ngozi in bewilderment, Ngozi embraced her tightly, promising to explain later. While the elderly woman, her hands trembling, added, Ngozi, I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I will do whatever it takes to make amends. And Ngozi, filled with pain, replied, It's not that easy. 13 years is not a short time. I built myself up from nothing, while you were absent when I needed you most. And now I don't know if you can change that. And as Amara stepped forward, placing a hand on Ngozi's shoulder, saying, Sometimes forgiveness isn't for others, it's to free yourself. Ngozi looked at Amara and then the elderly woman with conflicting emotions, as Chimaka spoke clearly and firmly. I don't know what you've done, but if you truly regret it, you need to prove it through actions, not just words. And the elderly woman, with eyes glimmering with hope, replied, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Then knelt, taking Ngozi's hands as tears streamed down her face. I have lived with regret for the past 13 years. Your father fell ill after you left, agonizing over what happened until he passed. And Ngozi froze in shock, asking, Father is dead? Why didn't you tell me? Why are you only coming now? As the elderly woman, gripping Ngozi's hands with shaking, confessed, I was afraid you wouldn't forgive me. But when he passed, I realized I couldn't bear losing you too, prompting Ngozi to step back and exclaim bitterly, All you have left? Do you think a few words of regret are enough? Father threw me out and you turned your back on me for 13 years. I had to survive on my own and raise my child on my own. And now you want forgiveness because you feel lonely? The elderly woman could say no more as her shoulders shook with weeping, while Chiamaka, watching in confusion, softly said, Mom, maybe she really does want to make things right. And as the cafe door opened with Ngozi's benefactor stepping in silently advising, Let her finish speaking, Ngozi cried, How can I forgive her? They pushed me into hell and now you expect me to just let it all go. To which her benefactor reassured with a gentle hand on her shoulder, Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting everything. It's about freeing yourself from hatred. Sometimes it's the greatest gift you can give yourself. And the elderly woman knelt lower, trembling. And I don't dare ask for your forgiveness right away, but please give me a chance to make amends. I can't change the past, but I promise to be here for the present and the future. And Ngozi, lowering her head in conflicted silence, whispered, I need time. While her benefactor nodded and said, Of course, Ngozi, you don't have to decide now. Remember, a family, no matter how fractured, can always find a way to heal. And as the elderly woman stood with a tear-streaked face, glimmering with hope, saying, Thank you, Ngozi. Just giving me a chance means everything. I'll do whatever it takes to show I'm sincere. Time passed with Ngozi keeping her distance, while still allowing her elderly mother to get to know Chimaka, who, with innocent laughter and curious questions, became the bridge connecting them. And one day, Kuyamaka tugged at Ngozi's hand, saying brightly, Mom, I think your mother really regrets what she did. Can you give her a chance? I don't want to see you sad anymore. Softening Ngozi's resolve as she mediated and invited her elderly mother to join meals and conversations. Until one evening, Ngozi said, You've hurt me deeply, but with enough patience and sincerity, there will be a chance to mend things. And the elderly woman vowed, I will never give up on you, Ngozi. You are my daughter, and I'll do everything I can to show you I mean it. And a few weeks later, Ngozi sat down with her elderly mother alone in the cafe's kitchen after Chiomaka had gone to bed, while her benefactor left them in silence as Ngozi demanded, Mom, I need to know, why did you turn your back on me when I needed you most? And the elderly woman, voice trembling with emotion, admitted, I was afraid, Ngozi. Your father and I were terrified of being judged as we protected our family's honor. And when it happened, we didn't know how to face it. But we were wrong. And Ngozi listened silently as the elderly woman continued. After you left, your father never smiled again, sitting by the window in regret until he passed. And I thought you'd never forgive him, prompting Ngozi to whisper, I can't forget what happened, but I'll try to forgive. For Chiamaka, for you, and for myself, as the elderly. The woman broke down and embraced her tightly, saying, Thank you, Ngozi. I promise I won't let you down. And from that moment, the elderly woman began helping at the cafe, slowly rebuilding her relationship with Ngozi while barriers remained. Yet Chiamaka served as their bridge, with moments of innocent joy until one bright morning the Chiamaka Cafe hosted an event to thank supporters as Ngozi, her elderly mother, her benefactor, and Chiamaka stood together in gratitude and happiness, while Ngozi declared in her speech, Life is full of challenges, but if we don't give up, we can find hope. I want to thank my benefactor, who saved me from my darkest days, and my mother for not giving up on making things right. And, with tears filling her elderly mother's eyes as she held Ngozi's hand, saying, I'm so proud of you, Ngozi. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. The event ended with laughter and warmth under the small roof of the Chiamaka Cafe, as old wounds slowly healed, and Ngozi, her elderly mother, her benefactor, and Chiamaka formed a new family. Not perfect, but filled with love, standing as a testament to the power of forgiveness and the strength of love. For forgiveness is not just about freeing others, but healing your own soul in the face of hardship and injustice. And acts of kindness like her benefactor's support can light the way through darkness, proving that though life is imperfect, love and sincerity can mend even the deepest wounds. And in the darkest days, there is always a light of hope waiting ahead. This story reminds us of the struggles many face and how crucial it is to approach others with compassion. Ngozi, cast out by her family, wandered in pain and rejection, yet Allah's mercy found her through the kindness of a stranger. It teaches us that no matter how broken we feel, Allah sees our pain and provides help when we least expect it. Her resilience, despite the judgment and cruelty she endured, reflects the strength Allah gives to those who trust in Him. Let this story remind us to be the light in someone else's darkness, showing kindness and love where others may turn away. Ya Allah, we pray for all those who are suffering, for the rejected and the brokenhearted. Guide them to paths of healing, surround them with compassion, and replace their pain with peace. Help us become sources of mercy in this world, just as you are the most merciful. Grant us the strength to forgive, even when it's difficult, and to offer love where it is most needed. Ameen. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like and subscribe to our channel, as your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day, and we are very grateful for your support. Be soon!